Welcome to the Black Lodge Games podcast. We have a treat for you today. We have Trevor from Me, Myself, and Die here to talk about the Broken Empires, role-playing, solo gaming, all of it. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to meet you guys in person.
Yeah. It's we've been watching a lot of your videos recently. One thing is that we've never been into solo gaming. Have never tried that. Yeah. But it's been really interesting to see your videos because we have hit on a lot of the same points over time with regards to what role-playing games are, what's the actual good experience that you get out of it. And then when we started watching your Sage's Library videos talking about things like Vampire that we love, and then finding new games that we hadn't actually heard of, not new games, but I've never been exposed to Harn before, and that sounded awesome. A couple of the examples that you had talked about were just awesome. We are very much focused on having the kind of immersive experience where the game comes to life, and have really gotten into recently a lot more of the sort of more on the side of the simulationist systems like Mithras and Axe and things like that. Haven't tried Ascendant yet, the ultimate autism simulator. But you're working on your own game right now, The Broken Empires, which is coming to Kickstarter on October 1st. And it sounds really interesting because it does not sound like D&D or anything like that, which I think is something that a lot of people really need to be exposed to. So if you want to give us kind of what's the elevator pitch for The Broken Empires, and then we can kind of dive in and talk about the setting, the mechanics, everything.
Sure. Well, it is most definitely not D&D. Part of my kind of brand on the channel is to do everything but D&D.
Good.
Just because the overwhelming majority of players are D&D players. That's the elephant in the room. 95% of role players out there in D&D. And a huge percentage of them have no idea that other games even exist. Right. And so you get all of these situations where you get these players or GMs especially who are wanting to branch out into something else, but they don't understand that there's a rule set that can actually do that better than 5e, because that's what they're used to. How can I use 5e to do my sci-fi spaceship thing? Well, you can't.
Here's the thing.
Here's the thing. There's many other better options. So that's that. So yeah, my game has nothing to do with D&D whatsoever. The mechanics are completely different, but they're not unique. But part of the thing about my game is that I'm not reinventing the wheel. Essentially, I've been at this for so long. I've been running games for over 40 years, and what I've done is tried to take the best aspects of all of the games that I've loved and put them together and make those rules work together in one cohesive unit. Now, that doesn't always work because sometimes a square peg don't fit in the round hole, but sometimes it does. And so that's been the past year of development, is trying to figure out exactly what aspects work and what don't. So, for example, I call it a Sim-Lite game, which means simulation light. In other words, every game exists on a spectrum. I mean, they exist on many spectrums, but the one I'm talking about specifically is detail of resolution versus speed of play. Okay. The simulationist game is way down the track towards detail of resolution. Mithras is a good example.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, the thing about that, with every detail you introduce, you move away from speed of play. It just gets slower to run the game. That's just reality.
Right.
And with rules light games, it moves really fast, but then you lose all the detail. So my goal with the Broken Empires is to have a game, and it's all subjective. It's always subjective. But for me, I want to create a game for me that hits kind of that sweet spot in the middle of that zone where you get great detail of resolution without having to spend an hour per combat round, right? Figuring out all these rules. So it is a D100 based system, percentile systems, which is going to be very familiar to anybody who knows Mithras or BRP or Call of Cthulhu or anything like that. But I treat it a little differently. I've taken some aspects from Delta Green, which is a D100 blackjack system. So you want to roll under, but high.
Yeah.
That's pretty crucial. There's something called success levels in the game. The goal in the game isn't just to roll under your skill, it's to roll under but high. And that tens digit of your skill counts as your success levels, which can be modified through other stuff, but that's the basic. So if my skill is 50 and I roll a 32, I succeeded with 3 success levels. The concept of success level comes kind of from Warhammer, but also from a lot of other places too. Again, there's nothing I'm really making up out of whole cloth.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that. There's a few things I've made up out of whole cloth.
A few innovations.
But a few innovations, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was to just take all of the things I love from all these games, put them together and see if I could make them work together. And so far, so good. So for example, in combat, you don't swing your sword against an armor class of 15 and do 5 damage to the orc. No. You attack, and the quality of your attack is mitigated by the quality of the defense. And then what is left over determines the result. You don't do 5 hit points of damage to the orc. You pierce his right forearm, causing him to drop his sword in pain. Now he's at a big disadvantage. That is what I mean by simulation. It simulates the kind of details that I, as a GM, don't want to have to be burdened with. I want the system to give me that information without slowing it down to a crawl. So, yeah.
It's go ahead.
I love hit locations.
Yeah, hit locations are great. And I used to think, and I think I may have commented on this on your stream while you were talking about this, but hit locations to me, I was just looking at that. I was like, more bookkeeping. Like, I don't want to do this. But then we were playing Cyberpunk, and my idiot character kicked open a trapped door to a target he was trying to get to, and it exploded and shredded my leg. And I was like, this is awesome, because now I know exactly what has happened in the scene, and I know this is going to change the way I'm going to be role playing.
Right.
And that is something that, like, I can play games, and I'm running a game that is, just fighting versus armor class, but the detail that you get from hit locations in a fight is something I generally don't ever want to live without.
I agree. And it's not just hit locations either. It's the concept that actions have consequences, which includes wounds. So in my game, there's no hit points. There's no hit points, there's no class, there's no level. Everything's skill-based. And when you take a wound, you have to roll something called a wound die. And basically how it works is, the worse the wound, the more likely that hit is going to incapacitate that hit location.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you're dead, but it could mean you're out of the fight.
Right.
So my game, a combat between two normal, humanoid combatants almost never would result in an instant kill. But it's very likely to result in, I've just shoved 6 inches of steel into your belly, and now you're rolling on the ground crying for your mother.
Right.
That's how that fight ends.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they do.
They do, yeah. Now, that said, you can go too far with that. You still want the game to be fun for the players.
Yeah.
You don't want your players to be so afraid of combat that they never want to engage in it, because why make all these cool rules if they're too afraid to get in a fight?
Yeah.
So fighting is still fun in the game. That's the reason why I pull back on some of the simulation. Like, for example, Mithras. Mithras does things, this isn't really related to wounds so much, but it's a good example of how my game differs from slightly more simulations games. So Mithras has very detailed reach rules. Okay?
Yep.
So, and that's really cool. Like, if I've got a dagger and you've got a spear, then in order for me to even get to you, I've got to get under your guard and get towards you and change the distance, right? That's all cool. But for me, it's just that much too complex. For me, this is not a criticism at Mithras at all. I love it.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So in my game, still same concept. If you come at me with a knife and I have a spear, I have a reach quality to that spear.
Right.
And what that means is my attack is going to get a bonus against you because I have reach. So I don't have to do any special rules or maneuvers in order to get up into the guard. That part is abstracted, but it's still taken care of with the rules. So that's what I mean when I say that it's simulating things, but then pulling it back towards the center to keep things moving a little faster.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And that is actually something that an area of detail I do like in Mithras is those reach rules, because even on something that Mithras does in a very interesting way is making defending actually feel like you're playing the game while you're being attacked.
Yes.
And depending on the success levels that and it's done differently in your game, but depending on that, it's like, you may be attacking me, but if I get success levels over you, I can close the distance without using my action point.
Cool.
Yeah. It's very, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, is there a similar way you're handling the attack roll with essentially a single resolution?
Yes.
Is there a way? Are there like opposed rolls
Yes.
in the? Okay, cool.
Yes. So everything. Actually, that's an important point. In combat, you learn so much from one roll. When I attack you, I know whether I hit, how well I hit, where I hit, and what combat maneuvers I can use against you based on that hit. And it's opposed against your defense. So if I roll 4 success levels, but you roll 2 success levels, I still win, but with 2 success levels.
Right.
Right.
So there's the difference between the success levels. Yeah, that makes sense. What the hell were those balloons?
Huh?
That was bizarre.
Oh,
Balloons just flew across the screen.
celebrating my
Yeah, I have no idea what that was.
Real big fan of Broken Empires.
Yeah, but so you have opposed rolls. I love that because it keeps the players who are not attacking actually engaged during the combat.
Yeah.
Now you're describing the way in which this single roll works. I'm assuming you have a chart.
No.
There's no chart.
No charts, no tables.
Oh.
What?
Yes. Yes, this
It's
is the
over.
thing. So many people look at it and go, okay, so it's going to be a bunch of tables. No, no tables. There's a hit location table. It's on your character sheet, and it's the simplest thing in the world.
Okay, good.
So how it works is the 10s die when you roll is your success level, your base success level. You can improve that with certain skill expertise and stuff like that. But that's basically it is. Okay. So if I roll 32 under a skill of 50, 3 is my success level. 2 is my hit location. And that chart is dead simple. It's basically 1 to 5 is the body, 6 is the right arm,
Yep.
7 is the left arm, 8 is the right leg, 9 is left leg, and 10 is the head.
Yeah.
And there's a very specific mathematical reason why 10 is the head, right? I'm not going to get into it, but essentially it just means it's harder to critical. Criticals, by the way, are doubles under or rolling your exact number.
Okay.
Got
So
it.
if my
Okay.
skill is 32 and I roll a 32, that's a critical just like
Or an 11 to
22.
22.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And conversely, over the scale,
Fumbles.
it's a critical fail as well.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
And those
Yeah.
can have pretty disastrous effects. But I
Right.
will say, too, the critical effects in the game are not an insta-win condition like they are in a lot of games.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I got a critical. I beat the world.
Yeah.
No. It basically gives you plus 3
It's an
SM.
at 20. I rolled an
That's
at
20.
20.
Thank God.
I know.
Kill all the dragons.
Oh my god, I hate it. I hate it
Not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much with that. No, what it means, it's a particularly effective effect. Effective effect?
Yeah.
Wow, redundant much. It's a particularly effective attack. And then what you do with those extra success levels is up to you, because everything's about the combat maneuvers as well. When you hit somebody, you're doing damage, which is based on your success level and the weapon you're using against the armor that you hit in that location. So there's piece armor, right? There's no such thing as I'm wearing chainmail.
Yeah.
No, you're wearing a mail vest and male leggings.
It's like you're wearing the green screen suit, but it's chainmail. You know?
So and armor saves your life, right? There's a reason why
yeah.
people wore it, and there's a reason why people wear it here.
Yeah.
But things like criticals allow you to one of the combat maneuvers you can pick only on a critical is to bypass armor. So
Yeah.
you find that, and now that's particularly
Can
devastating.
you damage people's armor?
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Okay.
I'm so glad you brought
Okay.
this up. One of my big inspirations is the One Ring for all kinds of things. I love that game. Not at all a simulationist game.
Yeah.
But that's Sim-Lite, right? I have simulation and then I bring in aspects of all these other non-simulationist games.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you can do in the One Ring is it's so perfect. It's so perfectly Tolkien. You can pull your helmet off to get just like a second wind kind of thing. So the idea of that is so great to me that I put that kind of thing in the game with shields and armor. So if I'm attacked and I'm about to take a wound and I have a piece of armor in that location, which is leather or greater, it doesn't work with padding or quilt. It's got to be good armor. I can choose to sunder the armor, and that's a voluntary thing the player decides. But basically what it means is your armor gets shattered, destroyed, but you don't take the wound.
Nice.
Yeah.
Same thing with the shield. You can split the shield. Anytime you're about to take a bad wound, you could and split the shield. And now it's cloven in twain,
Yeah.
but you can live to fight another
Right.
I really like this.
Yeah.
This has been a perennial issue I've had with really so many games. D&D, of course. Like, I've been living in my armor, first of all.
Yeah.
I never take it off. I've been in 9,000 fights with 10,000 different enemies, and my armor is just as pristine and immaculate as the day I purchased it.
Right.
Yeah.
I really hate that. Like, especially if you're doing like opposed roles, you're trying to lean into that simulation. Something that would matter to my character is the effectiveness and the upkeep of my armor. This is another level of like danger to a deadly encounter, a combat encounter. Because maybe I do come away unscathed with no health damage, no physical injury to myself. But my shield is broken and my armor is wrecked, and I need to figure out how to deal with that. I need to repair it. I need to purchase more.
Yeah, I need to expend some resources.
Do you guys know the game
Yes.
Palladium, but I call it Platium. You know Platium?
I'm aware of it. I
I
haven't
have not
played it.
but yeah.
So I ran Platium for years and years, and one of the innovations of Platium was, at least for me, and Platium came out in I think 81 or something like that, was this concept that your armor had an armor rating, which was essentially your armor class.
Yeah.
However, the hit, the 2-hit roll in Platium was, as long as you rolled over a 5, you're going to hit the guy. Now he can defend, and your number will determine his target number to defend. Okay?
Right.
So it's kind of like an opposed roll there, which is great. But then if you hit over his AR, you're going to do hit points damage to him. But if you hit his AR or less, I think it's AR or less, whatever, it's under the AR, you're going to do damage to the armor. And armor had SDC, which was structural damage capacity, which was just hit points for armor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, oh, so I have to do upkeep on my armor?
Yeah.
And as like a 9-year-old, I was like, lame.
Fuck this. Yeah.
As a 20-year-old, when I came back to Platinum, I went, oh no, that's killer.
That's
Love
cool.
it. Because now it creates all kinds of new conflicts and new kinds of things that the characters have to deal with.
And new motivations, right?
Right.
Like, it isn't this armor keeps breaking. This kind of armor, this particular blacksmith, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. Every time I buy something from this guy, this shit gets wrecked all the time. Like, no. There's better stuff out there.
Yeah.
There's maybe a more skillful guy to
Right.
craft me something.
And think
better.
about when you find a masterwork suit of or a chain hauberk.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, a masterwork, it's not magical. It's just extremely well made, which means it's not going to be damaged as easily.
Yeah.
And I have rules for that too in the game too, because the Broken Empires is not a high magic setting. It's not. It's not like Forgotten Realms where everybody and their dog
Thank
has
God.
magic.
Yeah.
No, it's very very mid to low fantasy is what I'd call it.
Yeah.
Magic is a whole other thing which we're going to get to.
Yes, we want to talk about that.
But so therefore, when you're providing rewards for the players, for the characters, you know, it's not the ubiquitous, oh, you've got a +1 sword. You know, yeah, they exist, but something as cool as, oh, you found a blade made by the master swordsmith Barzak the dwarf.
Sure.
And this one, wow, not only does this give you a +1 to damage, oh, it doesn't break on this or whatever, right? Like there's all kinds of things that don't immediately default to, oh, well, it's got to be a magic item.
Right.
Because lame. You want magic to be magical. You want it to be interesting.
Yes. You want
right?
mystery.
You want the mystery.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is probably a good segue to talk about the magic system.
I would love to talk about
all
that.
about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So, as I said, the game is inspired by about 30 to 40 different game systems that I've run over the years. And way back when I discovered the game Ars Magica, it blew my mind.
I have it over there somewhere.
I discovered it with the White Wolf edition, with the 3rd edition, actually. And the notion of magic being everything I wanted magic to be and everything I tried to make magic when I was playing a wizard in all of those games. My thing, even when I would play Rollmaster or something, I would look at, okay, how can I use these first level spells as devastatingly effectively as possible? How can I maximize the use of my magic? And when I saw Ars Magica, I went, oh, this is for me. Because the whole notion of you don't know spells necessarily. I mean, you do in Ars Magica, but those spells are made up of 2 components, which is basically a noun and a verb.
Yep.
What are you using magic to do to affect the world? Are you creating fire? Are you destroying corporeum? Are you destroying the corpus, the body?
The body,
are you thinking about water? I mean, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, so you can do anything with magic? Yes, up to a point, right? Which is why you have these limitations on it. But that changed my world. The idea that magic is magical again. So my system is very heavily influenced by that. However, it also takes kind of the concept of paradox from Mage. Because the cosmology of the world is reality is a tapestry. It's called the weave of reality. And what spell weavers do is literally grasp threads of the tapestry of reality and reweave them into a form that is pleasing to them. However, reality don't like that. And so reality fights back. And so the more ostentatious your use of magic, the more threatening the weave reaction is going to be. Now, you can try and mitigate that with your resolve, but if you try and cast a fireball in a rainstorm, that's a big magical display, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if your enemy is standing by a campfire and you cause the fire to kind of leap up and sort of burn the back of his leg, well, that could be, very natural. Maybe that just happened. Maybe it's coincidence.
Yep.
That weave reaction's way less. So what that does, it creates an incentive for Spellweaver characters not only to be very imaginative with their use of their powers, because they could literally do anything.
Right.
I want to, create an illusion. Okay, well, how am I going to do it? I'm going to control his thought, right? To put this thing in his head or whatever. But it encourages them to be more Gandalf and less Raistlin. The idea is that magic is supposed to be very mysterious and subtle. So you can do the big crazy spells, but there's a price.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is something I always love, is actually having trade-offs, because this is how
Hard choices, man.
Yeah.
That's what this game is all about.
exactly.
Hard choices.
That's actually having consequences for actions beyond just, you do damage or whatever, beyond the immediate thing that you can see right in front of you. There are ripple effects with everything. And so this is, and that's where the most interesting things happens in our games, is through what happens because of the ripple effects, what happens because of the choices you made, whether it's even just something that you've said to someone, or in this case, how far did you push it, to make this thing happen?
Right. How important is it to you? And again, that kind of leads into the notion of how you increase you advance your character. It's not through gold coins or killing monsters, although it could be. It's through pursuing your goals.
Right.
Every time you work towards a goal, you're going to be rewarded with experience. But that has a very specific meaning. Pursuing your goals means you are rolling your skills to overcome obstacles in your way to that goal.
Okay.
That's crucial. What those goals are totally up to you, but you work with the GM, and also there's a life path system and character creation.
Oh, good. I love life paths.
Life paths.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps you not only integrate your character with the rest of the characters at the table, because you make the characters together. It's
Right.
better
Yeah.
to do that. But it also gives you ideas about future goals. Oh, well, in my background, my mother gave me this crazy artifact to protect, but I didn't know anything about it. What is this thing? Well, one of my long-term goals is I want to find out what the secret of this artifact is. Boom, you got a goal. Anytime you work towards that, you are rewarded. But as I said, you can't just say, I go to the library and research stuff. What do I
spend
learn?
15 minutes thinking about it.
Right. There has to be a cost. So, okay, well, you have to go and you have to make the ancient lore roll, but it's going to take time. Maybe it's an extended test. So every time you roll takes a day. How many days are you willing to put into this when the bandit king you pissed off last session is coming down the road any day now? Or that kind of stuff, right? So everything in my games are always about making the player suffer by making them by having them make difficult choices. And even if you look at the solo show that I do on the channel, some guy on the comments said the other day something which was perfectly encapsulated. He said, "Oh, so when you come up with random events, your question is always, how does this complicate the life of the character?" Bingo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's exactly
This is exactly correct.
true.
This is the 1-2 way of paying everyone.
Yeah, which it is.
It is.
We are not afraid to tell people that they play
That's
wrong.
true.
So-
I'm very magnanimous. I think everyone
is
can
true.
play however they want.
Yeah, but on that topic, and I don't know if you probably have more questions about the magic or something, but I do have a question. So you've drawn a lot of influences from the kind of simulationist games. Have you taken anything from like the explicitly narrative story games?
Yes and no. So one thing you will not find in the game is any kind of scene editing tools or meta points that allow the players to take the job of the GM. That is not the case. There is no story other than that which happened to the players.
Right.
Okay. So in my GM section, I go on at length about that philosophy. And again, I'm trying not to phrase it in a way like there's one true way of doing it. But the fact is, in order to maximize what this game can give you,
Right.
You
Right.
want to be able to run it the way that it's designed to run. And how it's designed to run is to really enable the player characters to make their own choices.
Yeah.
And so by imposing a story onto the session, you're really doing a disservice to
Right.
what the player's experience is going to be and what your experience is going to
Right.
be. Right.
And the thing is, this has been my experience universally, because I've done I came up with the plot thing. I think every GM has at some point.
It's an easy access.
Yeah, it's an easy access, but the thing is, it's also a lot of work.
It sure is.
And it's much less work to just let the players kind of run amok. But the thing is, the story that comes out of the players running amok, if their characters have goals, it ends up being way more interesting than anything you could have come up with.
Exactly right.
Because this is the thing, like the kind of modern 5e sphere of doing things, it's the same story every time. There's someone who has activated some sort of giant laser that is in the sky, and we have to go investigate. It's like, it's the same story. We've all heard that one. The one that happens as a result of the characters doing things and having their own goals and trying to be like, no, I want to get that guy because he pissed me off or something like that. That always ends up being really creative and really, like, sometimes weird, but in retrospect, super, super engaging. It's so much better.
It is way more unique, way more different. And obviously it is this case. It can't be any other way. If everyone is leaning into their character with motivations, what we get out of it after the fact of us pursuing what matters to us, to
Right.
our characters,
Right.
that definitionally is more interesting, more
Right.
engaging, more resonant
Right. And
with us.
And the good GM can marry the two. The good GM can look at what the players are trying to achieve and weave it into things that he wants to introduce through the quote unquote plot. Right. He can make the world respond to what the character is trying to do without making it feel like it's a story, because it's not a story. But if the players are so strongly motivated, it becomes super easy for the GM to introduce complications to that, right? But you have to think on your feet.
And that is the thing. Like when because some people, I think, go too far in this other direction of, like, the GM is essentially not an active participant or player. It's like just the strict referee thing. I don't buy that at all. Like you are.
I'm
as the
role
GM,
playing the other characters
I'm role-playing
just as deeply as if I was a player playing a player
My job
character.
is to portray the whole world.
The difference is scope.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Exactly
essentially what
right,
it is. It's not, we're not fundamentally doing something different. And obviously it's like, yes, you do have the role of being the ref or the judge, like, and that is a very important aspect of this. But if the GM is also role playing, really trying to authentically role play the from the perspective of the villains or just the antagonists, whatever, if they're not necessarily evil, sometimes the player characters can be evil,
Right.
like that creates it's not only creates a more interesting story, but it's more engaging. And on the topic of, is there a right way to play? You said something interesting a moment ago about it makes sense to play the game as it's designed. And I think we may have said this off camera. First, we're talking about things. It's like you want to actually give the game a shot as it's written.
Right.
Any game that you're playing, to figure out what it is, because there's a lot of times now there are badly designed games out there. There's a lot of them. But a well-made game, there's going to be choices in the rules that are there for a specific reason, and they help you to do these things. So we are obviously totally fine with throwing out rules that we don't like, that don't serve the purposes that we have. But if you actually give the game a shot, a lot of times it ends up that there are things in those rules that are there because they make it better.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's important to actually understand those things and to give them a shot. So that is something that I hope that anyone who, and we will be definitely backing the Broken Empires Kickstarter on October 1st.
I put my buck in.
Yeah, exactly. We have put our buck in for the email.
Yeah, get it back. It's mine.
Yeah. He's immediately leaving for Mexico after this. Yeah, but it's you absolutely need to give it a shot as it's written first. And the way in which there is a right way to do things, essentially, it's kind of an internal thing. It comes from, what is your goal in running the game? Now, you and I might have different goals from what we want to get out of the experience of role-playing at the table. And that is going to mean that we're going to need different means to achieve that. So my way might not be the same as yours. We might both be right, but there is, dependent on your goal for what you want at the table, I do think that there are correct, or at least more correct, ways of pursuing
there is
those
a
things.
most efficient, there is a
Right.
most conducive way
Yeah.
to do the goal.
that's
and you can
right.
determine the goal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
But-
true, and it's important. This comes back to the whole notion of session zero and making sure that people
Right, getting
they're
everyone
all playing the same game,
Yes.
right, in their minds.
But
Right?
this- and
But
this-
to come back to this rules light thing and the tools where we got off on.
Oh, yeah.
So I do take some ideas from other. I wouldn't even call them rules light games necessarily, but for example, the notion of supply dice, which comes from Forbidden Lands, which is Free League. It might not come from them, but that's where I first experienced
Right.
it. The notion that instead of counting arrows, you have a die type. And so every time you fire, you roll the die type. And if you get a 1 or 2, it descends. So it goes from D12 down
Yeah.
to D6. So a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between that and just counting arrows? And the answer is, well, nothing really, except tension. Because now, if I don't exactly know in the heat of the moment how many arrows I have as
Yeah.
I'm shooting, that becomes awesome
Yeah.
as a tool of tension.
Yeah.
So, and I do that with medical supplies, because in order to treat any kind of wounds, and I just the wound system is so heavily influenced by Iron Master, and I love it so much because it introduces infection,
Yeah.
and amputation of infected limbs and all kinds of wonderful things like that. You don't want to try that at home, kids. But yeah, so the idea that you have these supply dice is taken from those games, and there is a meta currency of sorts, but it's called resolve, and all resolve is like a measurement of the character's internal grit. So it's not, again, all it does is it gives you the ability to spend resolve on, like, I really want to enhance this roll before the roll, or I want to add success levels after the roll, but it's going to cost me my precious resolve to do that. But resolve is impacted by, like, encumbrance. So the more stuff you're laden down with, the less resolve you have. So there's balancing issues like that. But at no time, in fact, I used to have rerolls. You could spend resolve and rerolls, but even that was too far down the narrativist line for me, because it felt like cheating.
Yeah.
Right. My whole thing is let the dice tell the story. Well, if you're going to let the dice tell the story, you got to let the dice tell the story.
Yeah.
So now you can't reroll anymore. One of the things I'm doing in season 4 is developing the game. So people who watch season or episode 1 of season 4 will see a very different game than episode 10, which I just released yesterday.
Right.
Because that's what happens. You develop the game, you excise things that maybe you thought were going to be cool, but then you realize were just cumbersome or not as cool.
Sure.
And so like the game where it stands right now in all of the 4 conflict arenas, which is just what I call the combat system, the travel system, which I want to talk about, the magic system, and the social encounter system, which is also the thing I want to talk about. They've all developed so much since I started the season that it's almost unfair to ask people to look at episode 1 of season 4 and as, well, this is an example of the game. Because like in episode 1, there was a phase system instead of an initiative and stuff. It was just very, very, very different. The core concepts are still there. The core ideas of it are still very strong.
Yeah.
But the details of how you arrive at the outcomes are slightly different now. But
Right.
Yeah. And that is something, even with Mithras, has like luck points.
Right.
And it can
Yeah.
feel like cheating for sure.
Yeah.
And that is probably something we are going to remove. But,
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the luck points.
but
They're not super intrusive.
they're not
So-
super intrusive, but there is the flip side of when we did a one shot of Dragonlance using Mithras.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because it's a better pair. And this is actually something I want to talk about as well. Pairing of system and setting.
I
And
can
why
see
that it actually matters. Because different rules produce very different sorts of games.
100%.
But I used a luck point because I failed a roll, and then I critically failed on the rerolls. Right. Like, sometimes it doesn't actually work.
It was a luck point. It was a bad luck
It was
point.
bad. But so we've gone over a bit about combat, a bit about magic, and you said there's also the other 2 pillars are travel and social encounters.
Yes, or what I call intrigue.
Right.
Yes. So I want to talk about travel because something that has been made known to me over the process of talking about this game is how few people out there have ever experienced what it means to have an awesome travel experience in a game. And again, coming from Lord of the Rings, that whole story. You take out the traveler's
It's a
map,
one long journey.
One long journey.
Yeah.
In fact, in the One Ring game, travel is actually called The Journey for a reason. So I'm heavily inspired by those rules because for me, getting there is literally half the fun.
Yeah.
The idea that you would just hand wave it away.
Yeah.
I understand why people do it. It's because they've never been exposed to the miracle of having an incredible experience on the road.
Yeah.
And you don't need rules for that necessarily. I ran a game of Platium that was actually set in the Forgotten Realms. It was a 12-hour session, and easily 4 hours of that was me describing the journey and the players just telling me how they responded to the storms and trying to find shelter.
Sure.
There's no real roles involved, and it was amazeballs. But that requires a particular style of GM, and not everybody can do that. So what I want to do is, and what I've done in the game, is I've tried to create rules that allow GMs a structure to be able to provide those kind of experiences without having to make everything up on the fly. Because again, not everybody is an improv GM like I am, right? So I want to be able to create the possibility or the potential for an experience that I've had so many times over the past 40 years that has been some of the most transcendent experiences in gaming. The idea of getting there. In season 2 of my show, which is an Ironsworn, that whole story is one giant journey and all about what happens to the character of Arn along the way. Now he's getting somewhere. He's trying to track down this thing. Spoiler alert, it's a thing. But the whole story is what befalls him along the way. What experiences, what opportunities and dangers does he have to deal with? So that's what my game does. It basically says, okay, if you want to get anywhere of note, right? Like, if you're going a day down the road, you're probably going to be okay.
Right.
But if you're on a journey, if you're going on a journey of like, right now, the rules say basically 20 hexes, so 200 miles or more, that's a journey. There's stuff. You got to plan for that. You want to map your route. You want to talk to the locals. You want to learn about landmarks. And all of that is done with a very simple set of common lore rolls. So it's all based on your skills. But then the party decides who's going to be the guide, who's going to be the quartermaster, and who's going to be the scout. So the guide's job is to get you to your destination with as few events as possible. No news is good news on the road.
Yeah.
Right? So if you've got a kick-ass guide and he can get you there with no events, whew. Why? Because events are tiring. On the road is tiring. And that's where the quartermaster comes in. Every time you stop on the road, basically how it works is the guide makes his roll, and however many SLs he gets is how many hexes you can go before an event befalls you. It's not about how many days pass. That's based on the terrain.
Right.
Okay? It's about how many days your guide can get you before something happens. That something isn't always bad. It could be an opportunity, but I'll get to that. So the guy's job is to get you there with as few events as possible. But when you do have an event, the first thing that happens is you check if anyone has infected wounds, because that's a problem. But then you have the quartermaster, and the quartermaster's job is to ensure that he has found good campsites, controlled the rations correctly, taken advantage of nearby streams and rivers to maybe fish hunting sites, all that kind of stuff. And the quartermaster makes his roll, his survival roll. And based on the outcome of that roll, as well as the terrain and all kinds of other stuff, will determine how much fatigue the players take. Now, fatigue eats into your resolve from the top end. So if I have 10 max resolve and I take 2 fatigue, now I have 8 max resolve. It doesn't affect how many resolve I've spent, but it reduces the amount I can spend.
Right.
So fatigue literally saps your resolve, okay? So that's the quartermaster's job. And then there's the scout. The scout's job is to look for opportunities and to avoid dangers. And his thing is all about perception. What's he seeing? What's he seeing out there? Now, his role is going to be influenced by the zone that the guide has maybe inadvertently landed you in. If it's a normal zone, that's fine, but it could be a yellow zone, or it could be a red zone, or it could be a green zone. And these are zones that only the GM knows. The GM knows what the zones are. The players can get an idea of what things might be if they role play that when they're preparing for the journey. You know, if they say, we've got to go 200 miles to the mountains, is there any place of refuge along the way? Well, I want to ask the innkeeper if he knows of anything. Well, make your common law roll. Boom, you succeed. Oh yes, he tells you. Well, as a matter of fact, in the middle of that forest on the way, there's a little place, a little shrine to the goddess of healing, and if you make for that, it's maybe 2.5 days out. You might be able to look for the tree with the many arms or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
Right. So the players can okay, all right. Well, we need to make for that. So the guide will know it's in this area. Or maybe he does know. Maybe, yes, I've been there before. Of course, I shall take you to this place. I'm a guide. I know exactly where I'm going. So the scout's job is to ensure that whatever event has befallen the group is an opportunity, not a danger. Now, that's not always up to him,
Sure.
but that's his goal. If it is a danger, they have to deal with that danger. How they deal with the danger, it's totally up to them. But the GM has a whole list of things that can happen, it's a series of semi-random encounters, but they're tailored towards the region. And it's also, there's a randomizer table in there too. So it's always fresh, right? It's not just you run into Joe the Dwarf who tells you how to get to the mountains.
Yeah.
No. It's
It's not a scripted event.
It's not a scripted event, right? But it gives the GM tools to be able to make something up that is appropriate to what's going on. Conversely, if they come across an opportunity, they have an opportunity literally to benefit from that opportunity. And what is that opportunity? It could be a chance to heal, because you don't heal on the road when you know.
Yeah.
Or it could be a chance to discover information that makes your journey better. Or it could be discovering, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff. So that is the gist of travel. You've got the three the travel roles of the guide, quartermaster, and scout. They all make their roles. They make their choices, and their choices are everything. How are they gonna manage their expenditure of what we call shortcuts? Right? At the beginning of a journey, people can make common law rolls to see if they can learn any shortcuts, and that's a finite number of points that they can use to help them on their rolls by justifying it. Well, remember the innkeeper told us that halfway through there's the tree with the many limbs. I want to take 2 of our shortcut points and add +20 to my perception roll to see if I see it. Great. Okay. You can justify that, right? So that's where the narrativist stuff comes in.
Yeah.
Right?
That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's where I blend that simulationism of you are immersed in this world and using your skills and only your skills. However, there is also this kind of narrativist idea that you've got these pool of points that you can draw upon, but only if you have justified it through your skill rolls
play.
before you started.
So I really like this because
That is very interesting.
Well, good, because you've already paid your buck.
that's true.
I'll never see it again.
Because it is true, you don't need rules for anything. We can just be but that's not the point, because you're missing the experience and the fact of the matter, to your point about the journey. And I think we've probably all been in games like this, and this is a very loud and strong through line of advice that gets thrown out these days, which is just to skip to the action.
Oh, man.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Which is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I was directing a movie, yes, I get it.
Right.
That makes sense. But because this isn't a movie, and the reason people are telling you to skip to the action is because they're getting a support structure, a kind of conceptual framework, which is incompatible in large parts with what the activity is.
Yeah.
And so while there are similarities between role-playing games and movies, they are not the same, and they're not even close to being the same. And so much of going on a journey or traveling for days and days and days, that's both in the moment and as I conceptualize an experience, that's how I get to know myself better, how closely I get to know the people around me. It's through the days of arduous travel, even if it's relatively easy travel. It's
right.
One of my favorite opportunities on the road is an opportunity for resolve recovery. And what that means is, at some point along the road, maybe someone remembers pieces of an old song and they begin to sing it to each other. At that point, the players can start to make their perform rolls. And if they all remember pieces of the song, then they've successfully boosted their spirits and they get some resolve back.
Nice.
So it's not everything's about a combat, right? That's
Sure.
the
Oh,
other thing
yeah,
what
yeah,
travel is. Oh, well, okay, because that's very common in the old school exploration games, right?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about this.
Yeah, which is okay, well, you've gone 3 days in this terrain. I'm gonna roll my D20 to see if there's a random encounter, which is always a fight. And okay, so how many fights did you get before you get to the dungeon?
Right.
Sure, fine, but that's not what it can be. And you talk about you just mentioned the idea that people are given bad advice, and a game isn't a movie. That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
You can run a game like a movie if you're a GM that's concerned about pacing. Like I'm big on pace as a GM. I know when to cut to the good stuff. However, that is like a hammer, man. Like you only use that when you've got a nail there. You don't use that hammer on everything.
Or a player that you need to really
smash on the head with a literal hammer sometimes. Don't try that at home either, kid. So yeah, I agree with that entirely, that it is a fundamentally different experience.
Yeah.
And you can play the game wherever you want, but if you embrace what the potential experience of a role-playing game can be, then you realize you don't need to rely on the tools of trying to make it like a movie.
And the specific experience that a specific game can give you.
Right.
Because this is
Broken Empires is a completely different game than Kelsey's Shadow Dark. Like
Sure.
it's a completely different experience.
Exactly. They're very different games. And again, they have very different rule sets.
Yes.
And there's a reason for that.
Yes.
Not every game needs to run on a D20 and a single thing and have all, that's another discussion. But this is kind of interesting because there are some of the old school games. Like I know exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, it's a fight every time. How many monsters did you run into? How, it's so boring. There are some games that have taken that in different directions, though, where there's a multitude of different types of encounters that you can have. But
Forbidden Lands is great for that.
What was that?
Forbidden Lands is great for that. Great encounters on the road.
Axe is also very, very good.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of terrain encounters. And there's also just you run into sheep and like cattle and stuff all the time too, which is like it's not particularly interesting.
Is that where you use your seduction skill?
Yeah.
It's lonely on the road.
Well, my players have now realized that if they speak with animals, I have to role play the animals. So it's constantly, it's like, okay, we're going to talk to the sheep now. It's like, God damn it. Again. Yeah. No, but this is very interesting. And like you had said that, the One Ring is like a big influence there, and it has this concept of the journey and whatnot. So this is really cool to see these different kind of influences. And the fact that you've taken these kind of narrativist things and said, no, you actually have to do resource management on this now, which is the more of the simulationist aspect of it, because resource depletion really, really can add so much to a game. And that is something that has been lost in more modern games.
Absolutely.
So this is very, very cool.
The fourth one is the social encounter. So this is a big deal as well, because this is another one of those things where I've run into so many people who say the thing, oh, we don't need rules for social. We're role-playing. You don't need rules for that. Well, that's true, but I'm going to say something very controversial right now, which even you guys might disagree with. If you don't have rules for what the character's effectiveness is in a social encounter is, you're literally role-playing wrong.
No, I agree with that.
Because if there's no rules, you're not playing the character, you're playing you. If I'm a charismatic guy and I'm playing a character who has a 3 charisma, to use D&D terms, and I'm talking to the king and I make this rousing speech and there's no rules in place, but I've just swayed the GM because I'm a charismatic guy, I'm not role-playing that character, I'm playing me. Conversely, if I have 0 charisma as a person, but I'm playing an 18 charisma paladin, I have no way. Because if I'm trying to sway the king, and which is my impression of a 0 charisma person.
Accurate.
Lore accurate.
So I believe that there should be rules in place for that, but only when those characters are pursuing their goals, only when there is something at stake. So, also, many games, like Burning Wheel, for example, which is an inspiration, treat a social encounter like it's a social combat. And there's a lot of games that do that. Oh, well, there's social hit points.
Yeah.
I despise that. I despise
Tremendously.
it.
Thank God. I am a Burning Wheel hater.
Oh, dude, we could do a whole thing on Burning Wheel.
Because we should.
I love. In fact, I think I said in my Sage's Library, I have a love-hate relationship with that game. I've thrown that book across the room so many times. I'm amazed it's still in one piece. But the idea that social hit points, you can't treat a social interaction like a combat.
Kill your personality.
I kill your personality.
Can't I just take the soul out of it?
Yeah.
Like,
That is not how people converse.
Right.
And Burning Wheel does it with their Duel of Wits thing. It's really cool on paper until you try and put it in practice and you realize, oh, people don't talk like this. Burning Wheel in the Duel of Wits says you plan out your next three things. Okay, I'm gonna make a point, and then I'm gonna make a counterpoint, and then I'm gonna do this other thing.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
When you're having a conversation with someone, you're responding to what they just said. Now, you can try and plan it out in advance, but you're going to sound like a lunatic.
Yeah.
yes, because he will be a
another
lunatic.
non-sequitur, sir?
That is what a crazy person would do.
Yes, exactly. And it's just like in a sword fight with their fight system. It's the same thing. They script 3 moves ahead. I can tell you, as an ex-fencer, if you try and plan your moves 3 ahead in a bout,
dead.
you're a dead person.
You
know, well, not in a fencing bout, you're not dead, but you're going to lose the match.
Yeah.
In a sword fight, if you try and plan 3 moves ahead, you're dead.
Yeah.
So that's not how it works. How it works is, and this is again influenced, this started with the One Ring, but then I took it a step further. In the One Ring, they have something called tolerance, and it's called the I can't remember, they have a term for it, but it's basically you're having an audience with somebody of import, right? So the great example I use is Bjorn. You're in the lands of Bjorn, and you're 12 dwarves, and you're trying to get permission to go across his lands. Well, in order to do that, you're not going to fight him. No, you're going to talk to him, and you're going to see what you can do using your various skills to try and influence him. Okay. Now, he has a tolerance. And what that tolerance means is the amount of times you can fail before it's over. And he's had enough.
Right.
Okay. The One Ring has about 6 different social skills that you can use: inspire, persuade, courtesy, things like this.
Yeah.
Now, depending on who you're talking to, those skills might have a better or worse effect.
Sure.
If you try and intimidate Bjorn, guess what? That don't work. That's a fail. Notch 1 against the tolerance. But if you do a courtesy, well, he likes that. And especially if it comes from a hobbit, he really likes that. So you've got these things in here, which now, here's where I took it. Here's the next step where I took it. And it worked so magnificently when I ran the One Ring, I had to put it in this game. The players are around the table, and in our games, they speak in first person, but you don't have to. There's a lot of players that say, my character says this. That's fine. Here's how it works. Characters in front of Bjorn. One character opens his mouth and says, "Great Bjorn, I beseech you to allow us passage across your land, for if we do not do this before this time, then the bad things will happen, blah, 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 blah." And I say, "Great, roll persuade." And he goes, "Okay." And then someone else opens their mouth and says, "If you don't let us across right now, bad things are going to happen." And I say, "Roll intimidate." And he says, "Intimidate? But I was trying to persuade him." And everybody at the table goes, "Dude, no, you weren't.
Yeah.
You clearly were trying. But I suck at intimidate."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Next time, use your head.
Yeah.
Or shut the fuck up if you don't have the skills.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds super harsh. That was not my rule. My table instituted that rule.
Yeah.
As soon as they realized, wait a minute, what we say matters. What we say is going to trigger.
Yeah.
How could this happen?
As players is going to trigger what skill the character has to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And suddenly, an audience became the most tense thing in the game because they were like, "Dude, we need Bjorn's help on this."
Yeah.
So, Dwarf, all you have is intimidate. You shut the hell up. Do not open your mouth, Brian. Do not open your mouth.
Yeah.
but I want to take part. You can take part in other ways. You can do insight rolls on the outside and go, boom. Okay, I think what he means by this. Oh, insight. Okay, now use that as a bonus to your Inspire, Great Bjorn.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So it becomes a tactical game, but it merges player skill and character skill.
Yeah.
And it worked so well, I was like, well, I have to put this in the Broken Empires.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to balance too, because I'm not saying mechanically balanced, but the balancing player skill and character skill, because like you said, you can be a low charisma person in real life. You rolled shit stats, but my character has an 18 charisma, or whatever the stat is going to be in whatever system. And there does need to be a way to support that. And it's the same way that like some people are not actually good at combat in real life.
Exactly.
And I have
do you want to rely on
rules
your
for
ability
that.
to swing a sword?
Yeah.
I guess not.
Where I think a lot of social mechanics in a lot of games get it wrong is that a persuade roll or whatever it's going to be in whatever system is a mind control roll.
Yes, exactly.
Right. It's
And
a
that's-
binary mind control.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like, okay, no, I convinced him. Now he has to do whatever.
Right.
It's like now he gives me all his money.
Right.
It's like, and I hate that
But
because that sort of thing. I think
that kind of
smothers the role play.
disingenuousness, though, to me, that's if you have the guy who's complaining about, well, I made a charisma roll. Why doesn't the king turn the throne over to me?
Right.
Okay, you're not playing this game.
Yeah.
You're just being you're trying to
Yeah.
break. And why are you here?
Yeah. It's a bad faith attempt.
It's a-
And
Yeah,
even if it's not a bad
It's a
faith
bad
thing,
faith
it's just
attempt.
the system might just function that way too. Is like that's
Well,
what I'm saying, and not this game, but some games do. It's like what is
I understand what you mean, because there is a
because then you can
there's
also
a
just
good faith-
dump all of your experience or whatever into raising the mind control stat.
But this is why
Yeah.
it's so crucial in the social system, and I talk about this specifically. The idea that some things are never going to work,
Yeah.
and some characters are not.
Right.
There's something
Yeah.
in the game called I can't remember what they're called. Preferred and disliked skills, I think. And essentially, if you wind and you don't know what these skills are necessarily, you could research it,
Yeah.
but like by observing the person. But if you use a skill that is their disliked skill, maybe they don't like wit. They don't like someone trying to be
Right.
witty or clever.
Yeah.
Well, then guess what? You've just taken a penalty to your
Yeah.
success levels or whatever. And how the players know that ideally is the GM role playing the response
Sure. Right.
of that NPC is
Right.
like, whatever the character is. So it's crucial that the players understand when they are in a social encounter, they understand what's at stake. They have
Yeah.
to know, why are we here? What are we trying to get out of this thing? They have to have some knowledge as to what failure looks like,
Right.
right? Which again is going to be based on the context and should be obvious most of
Yeah.
the time, but it's not always. They also need to understand that, and this is more for the GM, everybody's going to interpret things differently, right? If I say something as a player that I really thought was inspiring, and the GM says, roll intimidate, well, I'm going to feel pretty ripped off, because why am I being punished just because I don't speak your language?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's okay. You can have those discussions. In the social encounter system, it's assumed that those discussions are going to happen. Well, that sounds a little like intimidate to me. Really?
Yeah.
Well, I was really trying for persuade. Well, I don't know. And you have that. And that's okay, right? Because if you have reasonable people, dude,
Right.
that word reasonable
Yeah.
appears multiple times throughout this rule book. Be grown-ups, be reasonable. You're all here for the same purpose. You're trying to have an
Just
experience.
try to be normal.
Just
Yeah.
try to be
It's
normal.
hard for some of you. I know this.
Yes.
But just, it solves
That is
so
true.
many problems.
It solves so many problems, and no book can account for bad faith actors
No.
or
Right. Yeah.
freaks.
No rule can cure stupid.
Yep.
Exactly.
Big true.
Yeah. Or ugliness or, any of the other.
So this is really interesting to me, because I am coming at this from I'm very skeptical of like social encounter mechanics, generally speaking.
A lot of people.
Burning Wheel is like the worst offender, and yet it's a very proficient
Yes.
opponent of mine. But this point, which is true, like from a role play standpoint, everybody has a particular demeanor and likes and dislikes, and
That's part of
seducing someone or like using court etiquette as opposed to,
Yeah.
even if I'm trying to like intimidate, it may be like I'm trying to talk to Achilles, and Achilles likes, okay, like you're a man, like you've come out and like you've just said it I like your gumption.
Yeah.
Like that's.
I didn't get scared by you.
I didn't get
but
scared by you.
I
Like
respect the
I know
attempt.
that you're
Yeah.
a man,
Yeah.
and I can deal with you.
Yeah.
Which is like that. I get that. That's cool, and that's something that you don't get apart from the binary pass fail
Right.
critique of like persuasion. You also don't really get that from that,
I will
except
tell
maybe you
you-
have a persuasion and deception or an intimidate.
Right,
Maybe
and that
you get
actually
3.
feeds into something that I didn't mention, but it is also just as crucial. So this is not a binary system. This is not did you get everything or nothing.
Yeah.
It scales.
Yeah.
And this is where my timer die mechanic comes in, which is used throughout the game. Every time you say something, you strike a mark against the tolerance, right? You can a tolerance in my game means you have so many rolls you can make of any success or fail, doesn't matter, because your job is to accumulate success levels. The more success levels you get, the better the outcome.
Right.
Okay. The tolerance is how many rolls you can make until not the encounter's over. The timer's die starts to roll. And the timer die basically says if the GM rolls at the end of every exchange, and if he gets the amount of the number of skills that were rolled in that social encounter or less, it's over. Tolerance is fed up. That's enough. We're done.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck with what you get. And in fact, if you intentionally go over that, if you allow the timer die to prematurely end the encounter, you actually cut your current success levels in half. What that creates is a situation where you have players who know they're trying to get as many success levels as they can, but they do not want to push it.
Right. You can't just sit there and game
Role
it.
play forever.
Yeah.
Because that timer die is random. So even the GM doesn't know
Right.
when it's going to, know. Now, technically, the timer die is an optional rule. It's the more advanced rule, but that's what I use is the timer die. So when you are when the encounter's over, you look at the success levels that you've got, and there's a tiny little chart. Yes, there's a table. Oh my God.
Get out.
Just for the Get out. But you look at that, the GM looks at that chart and, okay, well, what did they get? Did they fail? If so, what are the consequences based on the context? Did they get what they want, but there's a complication or a cost or a compromise? Okay, what does that look like? Did they get everything what they want, but no more? Okay. Did they get everything they want and then some? The goal of the players, obviously, is to try and get everything they want and then some, but it's very dangerous.
Right.
Because if they push it too far, you cut your SLs in half, or you fail outright, and that's a mistake too. So it's not binary. It's, I mean, and again, all of this said, you don't need to use this system in every situation. If you're trying to bribe the guard to get through the gate, you don't need to bust out the social encounter rule.
Right.
You can just play it and say,
It's when
give
there's
him-
something significant at stake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even if there is something at stake, like if it's really important for you to get in the city, you could bust out the rules, or the GM could just say, make a persuade roll. Okay. Oh, you're giving him a handful of gold? I make it a plus 20. Great. Or he could say, what do you say? I say, I need to get in. Here, what if I give you this bag of gold? Okay, that's good enough. He lets you in.
Yeah.
You can still do that. You
Yeah.
don't have to use these rules. They are there as an option to provide that experience that I'm trying to provide.
Yeah, it is really interesting because I suspect hearing you describe it, it's like any mechanic is going to be by its nature a kind of artifice, but there's enough options and nuance here. It seems that way. I don't think it would be particularly difficult to really weave this into an actual organic, like, multi-party conversation in like roleplay in
Works
a
great.
scene.
It works great, but as we talked about, I think before we started, every game has rules. This game is no different. This game has slightly more complex rules than some games because it is Sim-Lite,
Right.
which means that when you start to use this system, if you're not familiar with these rules, it's going to be clunky the first time.
Yeah,
It's going to be weird. It's going
absolutely.
to feel awkward. But I promise you, as soon as you internalize how this works, and it's not complicated, it's just a new procedure. That's all it is. It's a new process.
Right. And
it's great.
there's something to be said about these skill-based games that I love as well, is that games like D&D, one of the big problems that comes into this, and it gets worse as the product grows, is that you get more and more like named powers and feats and like all of these things that you really need to know specifically, what does this thing do?
Yeah.
Whereas with the skill-based systems, it's like there's one die mechanic for everything, which there's not huge amounts of die mechanics in D20 games or anything like that. But it's like, basically everybody knows what they are capable of, and it's essentially the same thing as everyone else around the table. However, other people are going to be better at certain things, and so there is actually kind of a simplicity to it, that adding on a procedure like this really is not a burden. And
no, once you get used to it.
And the other thing is that, and again, like these games, they do take some amount of investment to learn to actually play. It's like, I can't show up to a basketball game with a baseball bat.
Exactly.
They're like, what are you doing? You're not playing. You need to know like the basics of the rules. Learning these things, they're really not that hard. And honestly, I find enjoyment even just reading the books.
Me too.
A lot of times.
Sure.
So
Me too.
it's
and I like subsystems too, as long as it doesn't go crazy.
Yes.
Like I have a universal mechanic. It's the D100 roll under but
Right.
high. However, there are times when that works slightly differently. It works
Right.
slightly differently in Magic than it does in Travel, than it does in the Social, than it does in Combat. But it's all recognizable.
Yeah.
And this is, I do not shy away from the fact that if you want to have a good experience with this game, you gotta learn the rules.
Yeah, of course.
Correct.
You
I
gotta
mean,
learn
you
the rules.
gotta
You gotta
honestly
put
have to do
time
that with any game that you want to play.
Right. It's not a beer and pretzels game. If you get out of it what you put in, just like
Right.
things in life.
Yeah, exactly.
Weird.
And that's the thing. Like the beer and pretzels game has its place.
Yeah,
like
super fun.
I like the thing is I enjoy doing one shots of
Yeah,
games
me
as
too.
well. Like I don't need to always be running a long term campaign, but when you this is something that I learned from my background as a software engineer, was that when my kind of mentor basically told me that when I was learning to code, he's like, you have two options on what you can choose for your text editor, the thing you're going to be using to write your code. He said you can use Emacs or Vim. These are ancient programs. He's like, but you have to choose one. And the reason is that you can take this one thing, learn it one time and very deeply, and it's going to pay off over time.
Right.
If you invest in your tools, you get much, much better results, and you get much more time saved down the road.
Right.
It's the same thing with game systems.
Right.
It's like if you find a game system that you think can be like, this is something I want to play a lot, not just like a one shot, spending just a little bit of time to invest in that system. And I'm not saying invest in shitloads of books and you have to buy all this shit. No. But you just learn it. That pays such huge dividends.
It's also the reason why you get a lot of, especially older players, that have not played any other game other than their house
Yes.
game for 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And those guys, it's funny because those guys would they're of the generation that would love what I'm doing with the Broken Empires.
Right.
But they don't know because they've just been playing D&D, D&D since 1977.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I look at those guys and I think, hey, if you found something you love, but my God, how do you not get so bored with the same system after all those years?
Yeah.
I mean, there's only so many ways to explore a set of mechanics before, we got it. We know. Jeez.
I agree. And that's the other thing is like, I like learning different systems because again, the games play differently. They give you a different experience. And sometimes I want the personal horror of something like Vampire the Requiem, and it does that very, very well.
Yeah.
And of course, this again is like the setting and the mechanics being tightly integrated and being paired well together because and this is where I think I really want to learn more about the setting of the Broken Empires because that is a very cool name. They're multiple empires. They are broken. This is implying that there are many big factions that are in a lot of trouble and there's a lot of conflict there, which is great. But I don't remember where I was going with mechanics. So anyway, we'll segue to that train just went off the rails. But yeah, we'll segue into talking about the setting. And this is, I think, from my relatively limited experience using D100 systems, which I very, very much like the skill-based systems. They tend, in my opinion, to lean into a more grounded experience, one that is conducive to having the illusion coming to life, those incredible moments of immersion and getting deep into it. What is this setting like? You said it's low magic.
Yeah. So, well, yes and no. So the setting is based on the world that I develop randomly as I go over the course of the seasons of the show on the channel. So when it started, I knew nothing. I rolled up a character in Savage Worlds. He was a character, even his name was random, Simon. He was a ranger. And I knew nothing about the world, but I was like, I'm going to go with bog standard Euro trash fantasy. It's going to be in sort of a Englandish, we're in the forest, and his half-orc friend randomly determined.
Yeah.
But it's funny what you learn about your setting just from that. Okay, we know there's half-orcs.
Yeah.
He's a human. He's friends with the half-orc. That tells us something. In that first episode, season 1, episode 1, he is being led out to be hung because he is a half-orc.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot about the setting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I say it's random, and it is, but my random creation always builds on what came before.
Right.
And that creates a sense of consistency in the world. In fact, if you look at all 4 seasons of the show, everything makes perfect sense because it's retconned. The entire thing is retconned because I'm making it up as I go. So I'm always building on what came before. And if something happens 3 episodes later that suddenly makes something that I didn't quite understand in the first episode, suddenly, oh, I know what that means. It clearly means this, and therefore that changes.
This is what Alexander McCrease refers to as abductive reasoning, where you roll a random encounter and it's like, why are the orcs here? And you think back to the previous details and you find the way in which this makes sense.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that is how the setting came to life. Now, in the first season, it was very confined. I didn't even know what the areas were called at that time. I just knew that Simon was going across this mountain range, that he found this undead temple. There was a city called Hundatora, and it was really big, and it was on a coast, and, and you know, he's looking for a priest to go into the temple. Okay, it's the priest of Morgus, and so it was all just made up. Well, gradually, because I'm building on what came before, that becomes canon.
Right.
So after the first season, we know that there's a place now called the Westlands. We know that Hundatora is a big trading hub in the northern province of a kingdom called Angavar. We know that there is an ocean, and we know that there's things beyond that ocean, and that we know that there's a place called the Ironlands beyond the Iron Veil, and that was interesting. Season 2 came about because right at the end of season 1, people told me about the game Iron Swarm, which was designed by Sean Tompkins specifically for solo. And people said, you got to try this. And I went, okay, sure. So I think he sent me the book and I went, oh, this is wild. It's totally not what I'm used to because it's a very narrativist game. But I'm like, fuck it, let's try it. Let's see what happens. Yeah. So it's set in this place called the Ironlands. And I immediately went, okay, so that exists in my world. But it's beyond something called the Iron Veil. The conceit was that the Ironlands, and this is just me making this up at the time and also random rolls and all this stuff and building on what came before. The Ironlands existed as basically a fantasy Australia where centuries ago, all of the magnates and potentates and leaders and kings of the empires at the time got together and said, there's too many goddamn criminals. We need to ship them off somewhere. Yeah. So we're going to find a place and then magically separate it from the world. Yeah. And they tried it once and they created something quite disastrous, which is awesome and part of the setting, which will be in the book. But when they got it right, they essentially created the Iron Veil. And they shipped off all of their criminals to the Ironlands, and then they put the Iron Veil up. And what the Iron Veil is, it's a large, shimmering wall of light that you can see at night the farther north you go. And it kind of shimmers blue and kind of seems like the Aurora Borealis. But no, it's the Iron Veil, damn it. Yeah. And the idea is if you're not supposed to be able to get past the Iron Veil. But Arn, who was that's one of the characters that we meet in season 1, who becomes the protagonist of season 2. Turns out he's from the Ironlands, and he's got to go back. He's got to go back to fulfill a vow. What's the vow? No idea. But so that created this whole concept that there's a bunch of potentates centuries ago who tried to magically separate a fantasy Australia. That tells you so much. It tells you, okay, well, who are these other kingdoms? Why would they do that? And all of that stuff comes out. In season 3, Edbert wakes up on this Caribbean tropical island with no memory of how he got there. What are these islands? I had no idea. They were called the Serpent's Teeth Isles. Yeah. Great. And there's a kind of a Spanish Armada type kingdom called Tikal Dandala. Great. What does that mean? Well, as we go through the season, so it evolves. Now you've got this whole Pirates of the Caribbean kind of setting way in the south.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then season 4 turns out there's this whole like ancient Egypt, Saudi Arabia kind of setting called the Red Wastes. And there's a city called Ansharir, and our character gets transported there to try and take down this lich. And so it just all builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. So all of this to say, yes, it is a mid to low fantasy setting, even though big stuff happens.
Right.
Like in episode 1, the gods literally are having a battle to prevent a giant tidal wave from destroying the city of Hundatora. It's played out in this little temple in this combat that Simon's part of. But literally, the gods are saying, I want to destroy Hundatora. No, you can't.
Yeah.
In season 3, the main antagonist of the entire season turns out to be a goddess who is fucking with Edbert the whole time. So it's very Greek that way.
Okay.
It's like the gods sometimes take an active role in the lives of their playthings.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't. So is it high magic? No. Do you have people throcking fireballs everywhere? No, absolutely not. Those weave reactions are too strong.
Yeah.
But does magic exist? Absolutely. Does big crazy ritual magic exist where they can open a portal that takes you 3,000 miles away? Yep. But there's always a cost. There's always a cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like magic is, you have the gods in a very, like you said, Greco-Roman kind of way, Clash of the Titans. So you have that, but that's really, you wouldn't even call that magic per se.
No. Yeah.
That's obviously the purview of the divine, these gods or godlike people.
Remind me to tell you about divine magic too, because it's super cool.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I'll do
Maybe
it.
just a second. No,
right
but it's it sounds very like you can have powerful magic, but the real problem is when people say Forgotten Realms is high magic, which is true.
And
it's less
ubiquitous magic.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Magic is ubiquitous. It's not so much the problem that there are very powerful spells or sorcerers out there. It's that there's magic everywhere. There's the old magic shop, and
Yeah, I despise that.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say I despise it. I love it when I'm entering into, like, I like the Forgotten Realms setting, the first edition and the second edition, not so much third and on, especially after the Spell Plague nonsense with fourth edition. I thought they destroyed the setting, but I like the first edition of the Forgotten Realms. I'm going to do a Sage's Library on it, actually.
nice.
Mostly because it's empty. Because it just gives suggestions of what's out there. It's nothing but just this wide open canvas for you to make it your own, which I love. But
I want enough detail to inspire me to do my own thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So my version of the Forgotten Realms was very mid magic. Yes, you do have these powerful Elminsters walking around,
Right.
but not everybody's hucking fireballs at each other.
Yeah.
It's just it's not that. So that's the same thing with my setting. But so the divine magic thing, this is also influenced by Harn Master, which is one of my favorite games. Here's how this works. If you play a god bound, which is what the clerics are called, you are literally bound to your god. Which again, as it turns out, that term is used, I think, in a video game, a big franchise that somebody did, but it was coincidental. So don't sue me.
Yeah.
So the priests are called god bound. Their power is all about asking for miracles, and it's based on a score they have, skill called piety.
Very cool.
Piety is the only skill in the game that goes up and down regularly with use.
Yeah.
Okay. The more piety you have, the more likely the god's going to give you what you want. But the god bound has no idea what his piety score is.
Okay.
It is secret, which means he knows the only way to have his god's favor is if he performs acts of service for the church.
Right.
Whatever church that is. So you know as a player, well, if I conduct a mass, I'm going to get piety points. If I convert a non-believer, a heathen, I'm going to get piety points. If I preside over a funeral with the rites of my God, I'm going to get piety points. But if I don't do any of that, I'm not. So the next time I ask my God for a favor, he might say, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
Yeah.
This forces priest characters to be played as priest characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, to roleplay. This is
Yeah.
a huge thing in Mithras, which I love. Mithras doesn't hide your devotion or exhort
No, not
skill.
at all.
But if you are an initiate or above in a cult, you have to perform the rights and responsibilities and behave in a way which is becoming of someone who actually has faith, who is pious.
And one of the great things about characters like this is that this causes tension in the party.
Yes.
Because a lot of times the party wants to do something that is absolutely abhorrent to
Yeah.
your moral code, and this causes tension. And you had this with like the paladin and everything in some ways in D&D.
Father O'Malley, we're going to summon this demon.
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, but it's this is one thing where like clerics in so many games, it's like people don't even know what god they're serving, and it's
Right.
like this makes no sense.
Right. They're just wizards by any other
Right. And
Yeah.
it's not only that it doesn't make any sense, but it's like you're missing all of these excellent opportunities to role play and to do all this cool shit
Yes.
and have consequences for your actions, which
Yes.
builds up this way more
Yeah.
creative and interesting
the gods
thing
and
that turns
cosmology
into
are
a story. Yeah.
always one of the most evocative things, one of the things I read first. I
Right.
love playing a religious character, even if they're not like a cleric or a paladin. And even paladins don't believe anything anymore.
These kids these days.
Yeah. But it's like,
Wait, yeah. Paladins.
Yeah.
it's like
Well, that was
the
like
gods are literally like, you're going to have a deity or whatever the milieu of the setting is. Like, this isn't just hand woven away.
Right.
Right.
I will say I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 and I played a vengeance paladin, which meant that I just got to hurt people whenever I wanted, which was, I mean, it was awesome for the perspective of a video game, but I was like, what?
Yeah.
It's like,
Wow.
this makes no sense.
It's like, I want to play a spite paladin.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So in terms of that example situation, you brought up the idea that what if the priest wants to do something that the players don't, or vice versa. There is an optional mechanic in the game that can help with this too, and it's called the personality traits. So there's no class, there's no level, there's no stats in this game. You do not have stats, you just have skills, but you also have personality traits. Now, technically, this is optional. So you do not have to use it, but there's rewards for using it. You gain more experience if you do use it. The personality traits are like a snapshot of how this character would react to any given situation.
Yeah.
And it's inspired by the Pendragon game. Okay, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Pendragon, right, with its match or its opposing traits, brave versus coward, right?
Yeah, the
reckless
virtues and
versus
vices,
virtues
yeah.
and vices, essentially. So the way it works in my game is each of those trait pairings has a score. So let's say it's 40. Okay, brave versus coward, or let's say careful versus reckless.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've got a 40. What that means is, if you don't know how the character would respond, you know how you'd respond, but maybe you want to, role play someone different.
Yeah.
And you want to see how this character might respond in this. You can say, I'm gonna see. Is he gonna be careful or reckless in the situation? So if it's 40, careful versus reckless, if you roll 40 or less, you act towards the more careful. If it's 41 to 100, you act towards more reckless. If you roll a critical result, it immediately changes 1d4 points towards the result. So if you're more reckless, or if you're very reckless, you're more likely to be reckless.
To be
next
reckless
time.
in the future.
Yeah. So if your personality changes during the course of a game, because of that, you get a bonus XP. Huzzah! It's all carrot, no stick. There's no punishment for not using it.
Yeah.
Also, if you say to the GM, all right, I want to roll this personality trait in this moment. I'm not sure how my character would respond to the priest doing this thing. I want to roll forgiving versus vengeful, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be bound by this. The GM says, okay, roll it. Whatever you roll, you make a little mark on the character sheet to show that you've done this now. You can take +10 to your next thing as long as it's in relation to the thing that caused this personality trait the first. So it's a little tiny reward, nothing crazy, but it's a little reward just to be like, okay, I am going to be vengeful in this situation.
Yeah.
All right, motherfucker. I don't like the way you've done this. And then you play that scene. And if there are rules that come up, you can get that plus 10. Haha. Look at me.
Yeah.
I get to play this character.
Right.
Right. Again, optional. Yeah, and you can use it as much or as little as you want. If you decide in this moment, I think he really wants to be brave, great, be brave. No problem. But if you say, I don't know, I know what I do, but I'm not sure what the character will, let's find out.
Yeah.
Look at it, clack.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very interesting. Because we were watching your latest episode of
Where this is used.
where this is
Yeah.
used because
Yeah.
she comes back from
Yes.
the dream prison. Do I, so like
Do I believe the lich that is?
obviously you do.
Yeah. I mean, there's a phylactery, like it's getting like.
Have you
But
guys
the thing
seen-
is, 'cause-
did you guys see the Lichdom prequel episode?
No,
No.
not yet.
You
Yeah.
should watch that.
Okay, okay.
It'll give you some hints.
I'm
Yeah.
torn whether to believe him. I want to believe a lich, but he's too weak to become a lich.
Yeah.
So he's a loser.
Well, I hope
Yeah.
it's clear that choice wasn't about whether she believes him or
Right.
not.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she didn't. She was like,
she
I
didn't believe.
definitely
Right.
not taking him at
The
his
choice
word.
was, does her hope that she
Right.
can get her mentor back
Correct.
Right.
outweigh her
Outweigh
cynicism?
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And I'm wondering, do you use this? Because this seems like a pretty interesting tool to reduce load on cognitive load of the GM. If your NPCs have some sort of a score and you're
Right.
like, I don't really know what this person would do. Let me just roll on that
Right.
and
It's
find
basically
out.
just
Yeah.
it's a more detailed NPC reaction.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Except instead of it being just 2d6 and if you roll 12 he attacks, it's based on the person. Now, the thing that I'm doing as well is one of my goals is to make this as easy as possible for GMs to run.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of moving parts. Which necessarily means that there are, and I normally don't like doing this, but there's going to be rules for the GM that basically truncate and I don't want to say amalgamate things, but there's tools for the GM to basically be like, okay, I'm kind of all over the place. If the GM's running a monster, okay, that monster is going to behave by slightly different rules than what the players would.
Sure.
Slightly different rules.
Yeah.
The players can still do everything they want. If they want to target the left leg and knock him prone, and they can, all of that's still possible. But for the GM, for example, this is a great example. If they run into an evil wizard, okay,
Yeah.
character, NPC, enemy. Yes, you could have all of that wizard's. He's got this skill in conjure and this skill in fire. You could, or you could say he's going to roll mostly fire kind of spells, and they do this kind of damage. Roll it and base it off that. Because it's easier for the GM to still keep the spirit of those rules without having to become so dedicated to the minutia.
Right.
Because as we know, a GM's job is hard enough. And I will
Every
never
NPC
use
does
the
not
phrase,
need its own character sheet.
I would never use the phrase, the GM should be just free to concentrate on the story. No. That's not what this is. This is the GM. It should be easy for the GM to have an encounter where the players are faced off against an evil wizard, his 4 orc enemies, and
without
there's an
needing
earthquake
to know
going on.
what's in his spell repertoire, where it's like, this was not an encounter that was planned. It
Right.
this something unexpected has happened.
Let's
even
hold
for
things up
me.
as I build this
I
player
have to-
character, basically.
I have to choose how many 3rd level spells this guy has. and
Right.
those- Yeah.
Right. And one of the inspirations for this is from Savage Worlds. So Savage Worlds, with its magic effects, they have things called trappings, which basically says, okay, you want to hit a guy with a fireball. That's a blast.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether
Right.
it's lightning,
Right.
fire, water, air. It doesn't. Those are just trappings. It's a blast. It's going to do this kind of damage. So those are the kind of rules I'm using for NPC magic stuff.
Right.
And I haven't fully developed them yet. They're still in the works. But that is all in service of making it easier for the GM to run.
Right. And the thing is, you can have, like, when you have very potent enemies that are like an integral part of, maybe they are explicit antagonists, you can, of course, use the more granular rules.
In the enemy section of the book, there is a fully statted out version of Akon the Death Knight from season 4.
Cool.
Exactly what his stats are, exactly like a character.
Right.
So yes, you can do that too.
You can do that as well. So it's more about having the tools at hand that you need in the moment.
Yes.
Without having the game grind to a complete halt. Which sometimes I'm okay with that. If there's like a big point of contention about like, we actually do need to know exactly how this functions. So, and there's a way in which that kind of maintains the integrity of the world.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be doing that all the time.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Having manageable NPCs
Yes.
from a mechanical framework, because I can do the role play, but
It can be a lot, man, in these like sim games like Harnmaster.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you about sessions where the players are fighting, 3 Pagalan barbarians. Well, that sounds easy, right? Well, each of those barbarians has armor, different types of armor that covers their elbow versus their forearm versus their hand. Each of them takes individual wounds in each of those places. Each of them has weapons that do slightly different things. Now, I love all that stuff. And because I know the game so well, I can make that.
Yes.
But that to a beginner GM or a GM unfamiliar with that system is going to go, this is unplayable.
Right.
I can't, how am I supposed to track
Why
all
would
this?
I want to do this?
Why would I want to do this?
That's the thing that like if there's been a couple of systems where I was just like, I understand that I could do this, but why would I
I'm
want
trying
to?
very hard to make sure that the Broken Empires does not fall in that category.
Right.
That it's
But again, something like Harn sounds like this is a very specific taste.
Yes.
That you have to have to want to play that,
which is
And
good.
it's good. I like that there are games that cater to those specific tastes, because a lot of games I think are too broad and they don't have any flavor. As a result.
I mean, the example I always use is Chris McDowell's Into the Odd. Now, I know Chris. I like him. He's a fine fella. But he wrote this game called Into the Odd, which is about as rules light as it gets. In fact, the book floats up to the ceiling. It's so light. And what it does, it really relies on a really wild setting that is supported by a system which is barely there.
Yeah.
But that's on purpose, right? He's doing that because he wants all of that system stuff to get out of the way of the cool experience of being in the setting. So it's not my cup of tea,
right?
But I get it. I understand the people who like it. I understand why they like it. But to me, I just know that I'd get bored of that so fast. Like for me, that's a really cool 1, 2, 3 episode session arc, and then you move on, right? Whereas I'm creating a game that's designed for like, no, you play this for 15 years,
right?
You can,
sure,
right?
Yeah,
exactly.
There's nothing wrong with rules light inherently. It's fine. But yeah, I prefer a game with a little more meat on its bones because I like systems and I like engaging with mechanics and I like seeing what they do.
And there is a certain way in which having more mechanics is it does support a longer term game, because there's going to be things like that you want to do that fall outside of the scope of whatever this rules light thing is. And then you're in the position of, okay, do I want to expand this myself? Right. And it's like, I'm writing a game,
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other side of that is with a rules light, as long as the core mechanic is solid enough, you can use that however you like. Here's an example, the Powered by the Apocalypse games. Like a lot of people feel very strongly one way or the other. I've had a lot of fun with them. We also get tired of them after a while, but that core mechanic is actually pretty cool, right? Like you've got your stats, which go basically 0. Maybe I think +2 or 3 is the max you have in one stat. But it's always, you want to do a thing, you roll 2d6, add your stat. If you get 6 or less, you fail and there's consequences. If you get 7 to 11, you succeed, but there's a cost. If you get 12 or more, you succeed, get everything you want. Right. That core thing can be applied to a million different situations without having a really detailed rule
and they
set.
do. That's what it's about.
Right. Or Blades in the Dark. Blades in the Dark. Blades in the Dark is one of those games I'm so glad it's there. I'm so glad that someone had the intelligence and creativity to make it. It's a game that I will never run again. I really appreciate what they're trying to do, but for me, it's so antithetical to what I value as a GM. What I value as a GM is about having core rules that help me paint the picture for my players, and that game is the opposite. It's all hand wavy. Oh, I don't know. It's kind of this hard, and if you roll it's 4, then it's kind of this. And I'm like, okay, I get why you like it if you like it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I
just
do
not
too.
It's just not my.
Well, there's another angle to like this question of depth, and we've talked about having long-term goals, and there's long journeys that can happen in the Broken Empires. There's a breadth there, and having a system that does not go from 0 to 100 with regards to character advancement. So you also mentioned Free League. I have Coriolis. I had Forbidden Lands. I gave it to a friend of mine's kid because I probably was not going to get a chance to run it. But I do like a lot of the Free League games. But my biggest problem with them is the breadth of advancement. It sort of terminates very quickly,
right.
And so it's
that was one of
really
the first,
quickly on. It's like
that was one of the first house rules I made in my Forbidden Lands campaign was, oh wait a minute, people advance way too quickly. I'm going to double the cost of everything.
Yeah,
right.
Because
it's not that I want to stay not powerful. It's I want to live in this character,
right?
You know,
right.
And which is another reason why I love classless D100 games like Mithras, like RuneQuest. There's a tremendous amount of breathing room.
Dude, you hit on something that I think is so vital, and it's also something that people complain about for the wrong kind of reasons. They say, this argument that I see all the time, yeah, but why D100 instead of D20? It's the same thing. Well, first of all, anyone who's ever actually rolled a D100 versus a D20 knows that's not the same thing. Viscerally, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
Second of all,
the same
you
thing
know
like
what the
dice
difference
pool versus
they're like, well, why
feels
1% increments? Why?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Because if I have a 63% chance of rolling a skill and I roll 64, that's why.
Yeah.
And also, when I want to advance my character, advancing a level and getting all this extra stuff versus, oh, my skill went up 3%. Oh, awesome. I'm slightly better now.
Yeah.
That's how you tease out progression, and it feels more like you're inhabiting the character.
Exactly.
It feels the discrete leveling up, getting this like huge new boost in power, potentially hit points, all of that. That is a certain type of game. It has its place. I do enjoy that somewhat, but I think the reason that the skill-based systems, especially these D100 systems, feels so much more grounded and real is the advancement, that it is a far more natural progression that happens over time.
Yeah.
And this is another way in which where it's like becoming more powerful in these games. Really, it doesn't feel like I've gone from lowly peasant with a sword to now I'm some sort of like demigod, like with these weird jumps.
Yeah.
It really does feel like you're becoming a more developed character, like person. It's the difference between like, I don't know if how into video games you are. There's one, I love this game, called Kingdom Come Deliverance. That is,
oh my God,
it's so good,
amazing.
Yeah, it's
amazing,
so good, and like,
so hard, it's impossible at the beginning.
It's
trying to like sword fight with those guys. No, there's no way, dude.
You
get on the horse, get out of there.
Yeah, you get absolutely wrecked. I love that game though, because by the end of it, it's like this is another one where you very slowly advance in skill, you very slowly advance in station, but by the end of it, there is a massive jump. Like your competence has come very, very
You're pretty
far.
much unstoppable.
Right. But you're still like, you are unstoppable within the context of this world in this game, and it just feels so much more grounded. And one of my favorite moments in that game was realizing, holy shit, I don't know how to read. Right. I guess I have to go do that now. Yeah. It was so good.
Exactly.
And it's got that, I love like an actual medieval experience. Taken seriously.
Oh, totally. And that's the most immersive video game I've ever
played. It's so good. And the next one's coming out.
I know. Yeah. I know. It's gonna. That's my life. That's gonna be my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of the D100 game where you are slowly teasing out progression, it allows you to not only feel like the character is slowly evolving in a kind of truthful way, but it also it just feels it makes it easier to inhabit that world. It makes it easier to justify certain, like, because, like in my game, there are things called specialties, which are, they're like feats, basically. You can gain them, but they're not, sudden now I can leap over a building.
Right.
It's not that. It's, now I'm slightly even better at this special thing in this very specific circumstance.
Right.
But you will be, that's the thing, is that characters in this game start competent at the thing that they are good at. Like there's no 0 to here. No, you are You're competent.
Right.
I don't like the word hero because heroism is a product of your actions, not a product of your special abilities.
Exactly.
Right.
And this game is very much tailored towards that. So yeah, you start very competent, and yeah, you can develop any way you want. If you're some badass warrior guy and you really want to become what's called a fade, which is someone who can learn magic, you can do it. It's expensive, but you can do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like RuneQuest that way. If you really want to learn sorcery,
You can do
it.
Yeah.
It's just more expensive. Or it's like a Rollmaster, if you guys are familiar with Rollmaster. In Rollmaster, you had classes. However, the choices of how you increased your skills was based on a cost associated with your class. So if I'm a warrior, when I level up, I have a certain amount of development points, and it's super cheap for me to spend that on combat skills. Nothing to it. Pow, pow.
Yeah.
Can I spend it on magic? Yeah, it's just really expensive. I love that because it's affording niche protection without slamming down this artificial class on you, saying you are this thing and you will always be this thing.
Right.
And in order to justify that, we have to give you more toys every time you level up. Look,
Yeah.
your toys.
Or even worse, you have multi-classing where it's now I exist in this silo, and now suddenly I exist in this already competent at level 1. Like, oh, now
I'm a paladin, but
I have
I've taken
three-
3 levels of warlock.
I have to get 3 levels of warlock.
Right. I mean, that's a min-maxer's dream, right? And again,
Yeah.
I don't really care about min-maxing. I don't care if people like use my game and say, okay, what's the optimum build? For one thing, I can't stand the concept of build.
That is one thing I like about most of these D100 games is there's not an optimized build.
Right.
There are probably certain skills that are weighted more in play than certain others, but there's no like, oh, I take this combination of feats or proficiencies and all this stuff, and now I have the optimized guy to do X thing,
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not something I enjoy at all.
No, I mean, and there's just a certain type of player that likes that thing.
Yes.
And they're always going to exist, and that's fine. But I look at that and I think you guys who like that kind of thing, you have got your game already.
Yeah, you have a lot of games
you've got
that
a
are
lot of
made.
games.
Yeah.
You know, and all of them start with Pathfinder 2.
Yeah.
And that is really what it comes down to, too. Like, I'm unapologetic in what this game is, what it's designed to do, and the experience it's designed to create.
Good.
And when people say things like, oh, well, it just seems a bit too complex, my answer is, for you.
For you.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine.
I'm
You've
sure
got
it is
your
too
games.
complex for you. Yeah.
And there are other people who say, well, why didn't you have more complicated infection rules?
Right.
Because I don't want it.
Because I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Because
that's
I
just the way it
There's always a call.
Right.
And this is the
It's
thing.
a
It's
call.
like there is no
there's no
Plat-
optimized build for the game. You know?
yeah, there's no platonic
designing the
ideal
game.
of a game.
Yeah.
I need to have a vision. We talk about this
All the
so many
time.
times.
Yeah.
Like, have a vision, believe in the vision, know the vision, and to the best of your ability, make that thing
Right.
real. And then don't apologize for it.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you know it's doing its job
Yeah.
well. Some people will like it, some people
Yeah.
won't.
Yeah.
And a
And
criticism
Every
is like,
GM's going to house rule it. Every GM house rules everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. And something that I actually am very, very hopeful about this game as well is that there are so many people out there that are they may not even just be like, oh, I only play D20, but that's the only thing they've been exposed to.
Right.
And there is this complete other side of the games of simulationism that is really interesting and really cool. And they've probably never even heard of most of these
Yeah.
games.
Yes, exactly.
And so if you can break through with some of the mainstream appeal that like your channel has, I think, taken like not taken, but has offered something very different than the standard D&D YouTube. I almost said something that I probably shouldn't, but the standard D&D YouTube sphere. And this can be a gateway drug into not really Sim-Lite, but into the harder core simulations.
For sure.
Because it's
Yeah.
like, please, like, find this game and find the other games that are related to it. And all these, it's like, open your horizons.
yeah.
Because there's a million rules-like games out there.
Exactly.
There's a million.
This is a huge deal. I'm trying to serve an underserved market.
Yes.
I'm trying to serve a group
100%.
of people that just don't have a lot of options. And they're good options. Like
Right.
Mithras is great.
Exactly.
I'm a big Hornmaster fan. You know, there's chivalry and sorcery to a lesser extent.
Uh-huh.
I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but you want to play OSR? Well, back up the truck, boys, because we got a whole. Here it comes. You got your X, your OSC, your Shadow Darks, this coming at you. And I think people are noticing the glut in the market. They're going, oh, another game that's D20 with hit points and armor class, and I play a fighter that goes up in levels.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
This is what I like about Kelsey's thing is that she, first of all, she's the best. Oh my God.
Yes, she was super nice.
Super nice to us at
met her
North
very
Texas
briefly.
RPG.
I've got to know her very well over the past year. I have to tell you a story about her in a second.
Sure.
But her game is trying to get back to the basics, but still it has a very specific atmosphere. It has a very specific flavor and feel. And that is what separates it from the others. Yes, she has a couple little interesting mechanics like the torch thing and all that stuff.
Sure.
And, you know, the fact that when you level up, you get random stuff. I like all that. That's fine. But really, I think what Shadow Dark sells is a feeling. It's an atmosphere.
100%. That's what it is.
Backed the Kickstarter based on the art alone.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
I was like, I want that.
Because it's so different from old school essentials, from you name it, man.
Yeah.
And again, no shade on those games. I grew up with the Moldvay D&D, the pink box set with the Arrow Lotus covers, man. I still have it.
But it's like someone did it already, and then someone did it later by reprinting it when it was out of print.
People
It's
did
like
it too.
at 800. It's like
I don't get it when I see these Kickstarters saying, "Okay, I've got this great idea, guys. It's a fantasy role playing game.
Yeah.
It uses a D20 against something called an armor class.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And you have something called hit points. Oh my God, really? I've never seen that before. And again, I don't care. Those people that love those games, more power to them.
Right.
Enjoy your endless amounts of games that you can choose from. Bravo.
Right.
Well done. Congratulations. You will never lack for a game. But my Mithras bros.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys got something good coming out.
yeah.
And this is also something. So the McCrease, who did Axe, he also has a game called Ascendant, which is the ultimate simulationist superhero game that works on a totally original system where the math is all logarithmic and it's wild. That game has been extremely successful, which is like, who would have thought that a physics simulation of a superhero
that literally
world,
is what it is.
Yeah,
There's a chart with the cubic volume of gas.
Yeah, like it's nuts. It's death by charts. But the thing is, the player-facing mechanics. So character creation is kind of front-loaded on how much work there is to do. Quite front-loaded. But then the player-facing mechanics are very simple. It's you roll D100, you consult a chart. That part of it is easy. It's very, very in-depth. It's a huge book. It's like 500 something pages.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But that has been very successful. It was at the top of Drive-Thru RPG for a long time. It's been one of the most successful superhero games. So there is a market for people who are desperate for more interesting simulationist games.
Absolutely.
And if you can, I am very, very hopeful that in the same way, there's kind of an overlap here with Shadow Dark, where Kelsey was able to take kind of the old school feel but say there are all these things that I like about 5e and bring that in. And there was a whole lot of 5e people who had never tried an OSR style game, who've never tried a sandbox, have never tried a game that has any sort of real lethality to it.
She was the gateway drug.
Yeah, she was the gateway drug for that. And she was very well rewarded for that because she made this cool game. And I'm hoping that there's a similar way in which this does the same thing.
We're at 5,500 people right now for the pre-launch, which is really good.
That's
awesome.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
We're doing well. I was at the Ennies with her and Dave Thalmavor and Justin Alexander. We were all at the same table when she won. All of our people won. Dave won. Justin won. She won all of it. I'd never been to the Ennies before. I don't really give a fuck about those kind of, because I worked in Hollywood. I know how these things work. But I will tell you that being at the table with her and seeing her win every single category and go up there like a pro and just do nothing but thank everybody.
Yeah.
I was like,
100% a class
she's
act.
the best. Yeah. She's the best. This is a story I'll tell you about her. When I first met her, I was at Gen Con for the very first time last year. I'd never been all these years. Somehow I'd never been.
Yeah.
And so I got invited to go because of Columbia Games, which is the Harn guys.
Yeah.
And so I went with them. And at one point, Professor Dungeon Master at Dungeon Craft, I'd reached out to him because I'm a patron of his, right? And I said, hey, man, I'd like to meet you, do an interview because I want to talk to some people for my own channel. He said, yeah, of course. So at one point, he said, hey, it's Kelsey Dion's birthday. Baron Durop and some other Dungeon Masterpiece. That's his channel. And some other guys are going to be there. You should come. And I'm like, oh, I really don't want. No one's going to know me. I'm just, this is going to be all right. Okay, I'll go. I'll have a drink.
Yeah.
I'll shake their hands. I'll have my drink, and I'll go home, and then I'll go back to the hotel.
Yeah.
So we go to the restaurant, and she's there with Baron and all these people. And I walk in the room. She looks up. She sees me. She stands up. She comes over. She goes, "You're here!" And she throws her arms. I'm like, "You know who I am?" She's like, "Oh, are you kidding? Me, myself, and I is the best." I'm like, "Oh, nice to meet you." So we were like fast friends immediately.
Yeah.
But she turned out. I spent the whole weekend with her, and she just turned out to be the most solid. Like, yes, she's nice. Yes, she's generous and social, but solid. I talked with her about game philosophy and stuff, and I was like, we are the same. Like, we totally are the same. She's not a simulationist gamer,
right.
Obviously, but she gets it, and she's filled with the love of game design. She's filled with the love of these things, and you can just read. You feel it in her presence, man. She's one of my favorite people.
Yeah. We only met her very briefly at North Texas RPG Con. She was super nice. Somehow, I mean, it was probably on Twitter because we said we were designing for something for Shadow Dog. She's like, "Oh yeah, you're making something for our game, right? Thank you so much." I was like,
"You're those horror people."
Yeah. She's like, "What is it?" And I was like, "It's kind of this goofy brothel."
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But it was odd that she's like, "Thank you so much for making something for my game." And I was like, well, thank you for making a game that I can make something for.
Yeah.
Which, to segue into, are you going to have an open license?
I don't know yet. That's still in discussion. And I know people say to me, "Oh, whatever, you know I really don't know the answer."
Yeah.
And I don't have to make that decision for a while. There's pros and cons. I'm very, very careful about my own IP. I'm very careful about who can do what with it. So my inclination is to say, nope, you get what I give you. That is all. Official materials only. Or, I see the alternative, which is, but you open it up and then people come up with all this cool stuff and it gets more audience and more eyes on it. I don't know. There is a middle road there too, which I might go down. We're talking about it. I just have to look at it more. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I very much encourage you to go the open license route. Not only simply because this sounds like a very interesting game that I would want to make content for, but I think that there are actually a lot of kind of costs associated with keeping things closed that aren't apparent immediately. Because there are things like what happens to the game if something happens to you, like God forbid, like the game's just over at that point if Trevor is out of the picture, or if you sell the property to someone else at some point,
for example.
For WotC, yeah, exactly. But there are things where, and it's different because you are the creator of the game in the setting and the IP itself. But there's things like the Conan 2D20 game that got killed because the rights holders in China basically said, you literally have to burn all of the books in your warehouse because we're not going to let you sell it anymore.
Wow.
Such a crime.
It sucks. It's a crime because that game is gone. They can't sell the PDF. I bought all the PDFs in their literal fire sale that they had. But there's I think that the idea of like brand protection and like really not wanting, you want things to be good. I get that. Like and people making things for your game to be of high quality. I 100% agree with that. However, I think that because the fear is like, what if people make it just a bunch of shit, And it's like,
what happens when they make a bunch of shit?
Yeah.
Well, anyone should be so lucky to have the DM guild thing happening where people are just, throwing the 5e slop into it. To imagine that is not also going to attract brighter people that are going to make the things, the cream that rises to the top, I think is it's something that I don't think should be discounted. Anyone should be so lucky to have a mountain of slop being produced for their game, because it means that people love the game, and it gives the game more longevity. And because I don't want games that are only going to be supported for a few years or whatever, or until there's a different project that you become interested in. Right. And now you have shiny. Yeah, you have new shiny, but I mean that, like, everybody gets bored of what they're working on at some point.
Yeah, that's true.
That is true.
I have to tell you that this next project I have in mind, it's this great idea. You roll a d20, see, against an armor class.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. But I would just say I would definitely encourage you to go the open license route, because I think ultimately it makes the game have it gives the game legs, and it continues to just increase the community of it. I mean, there's look at what's happening in Shadowdark. That's got an actual thriving third-party market, and not just to say that our Kickstarter that was successful was so great. That's not it. But I mean, it's like there's tons of people making stuff for it all the time, and that keeps people excited about playing it.
And you also do having it open does distance you and mitigate concerns of a PR situation happening. If it's like you curated this guy, you specifically signed off on it.
It's like
it's like
you're kind of insulated from that if it's like, someone made something and it was very popular, and then that person turns out to not be popular later on. You didn't make it. It's like you can't, because there is kind of a beauty from my perspective of, like, you can't control what's made for it. And in some cases, that's going to be bad. In some cases, that's going to be really good.
I mean, everything you're saying makes sense. But again, I worked in Hollywood too long. I still work there. My God. And the idea of controlling I worked with Marvel for too long. And Marvel is extremely careful about their brand and who controls it. I wrote for them for a long time. And it was a great experience. But, if you tried to do anything that fell outside of the exact parameters of what they had decreed, no, not going to happen. It's going to be changed. That's not what I'm suggesting I want to do with the Broken Empires. But I am saying that I see the value in maintaining strict quality control.
Sure.
Yep.
So that's the other side of it. But so noted, point taken. And it is.
And I would say that my last, only kind of last point to throw on that is that no matter what, when you're making it, you have the quality control. That the buck stops with you on that. Yeah, there's going to be people who are not, maybe don't have the same quality of trade dress or of writing or of anything else that's going into it. But the thing is, when people see those products, if they buy those products and play it, they again are going to be filtering back to whatever is the next thing you're making. Because it was like looking at, you're familiar with Neil Gaiman, I'm sure. Not about his controversy recently, but he had realized that a lot of his work was being pirated in the Russian territories in the 90s, where people couldn't really afford a lot of times to buy things, and there was no real law there for a while. Right. And so his stuff was being reproduced all the time, and the publishers were like, we have to get this under control. But he noticed, he's like, but then, like, my actual sales in that area were increasing at the time. And so he asked the audience, who here has a favorite author that when they write a book, you get the leather-bound edition, the whatever, you pay whatever price it is for that book. Like, everybody's raising their hand. They're like, okay, how many of you found out about that author because you borrowed the book from someone? And they all raise their hands. So he's like, this is a way that is just increasing my kind of market share. It's like, it's free publicity. And it's not this is, again, people can use your brain. It's not a one-to-one relation here. I understand that. But I think there is a sense in which the more stuff that is made for your game by independent people, the more that's going to drive back to your stuff, which will always have the quality control, and as long as it's not like they can't put your name on it and say, hey, this one was written by Trevor, then I think it's a positive. So that's all I'll say on that. That's my pitch.
Yeah.
I want to make stuff for the game too. So that's I definitely have a selfish motivation here.
Yeah, it's a good pitch. I mean, I know myself, if there had been situations where I encountered a game in a form of PDF, for example. But I liked
Yeah, the
it.
PDF fell off the truck.
Somehow. If I liked it, the first thing I did was buy the book.
Hardcover. Yeah,
And,
that's the same thing I
and
do.
you're right. If that creator then did something else on a Kickstarter or something, you're damn right. I'm looking at that. And not only that, but I'm one of the completionist fools. Sure, I'll spend $500 to get the
I'll buy
special
everything.
extra awesome thing that I know is costing you 3 cents to make, but I'll spend $100 on it. I'm that idiot. So, because I just like it. And also I like supporting them. So I would like to believe that most people think like that.
Right.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, but I mean, well, here's the other thing. The PDF question. Once the PDF is released, it's released. There's no. So that's like not really a concern, but yeah, that's all I would say. I like that a lot more people have adopted these licenses. I know the licensing is all crazy and stupid. We've had to read a bunch of these things recently. But
what's your Kickstarter under?
it's Kelsey has her own Shadow Dark license, and it's it's very permissive. And it's very simple to.
Is it based on anything else, or is it her own?
It's not. It's not OGL. It's like a one-page thing in the back of the book,
or whatever that.
It's not orc. Okay. Yeah, no. It basically says that like you can't reproduce anything. Obviously, like the art, not happening. The only things that you can kind of quote are maybe monster listings and spell descriptions for use in like modules and things like that, but not to. Quote verbatim anything else. And so it's very, very permissive. And so a lot of people are making stuff for it, and it is all of varying quality, but there is some stuff out there like our friend.
This is contrasted because we're working on a Mithras product next, where Mithras has two, in some ways, contradictory, and it's certainly convoluted and sort of difficult to understand, two different licenses.
Yeah, they have an orc licensed Mithras Imperative.
Actually, possibly 3 if you count Classic Fantasy
in there as
its
well.
own orc thing.
Yeah.
And a Mithras Imperative license, and then there's the Mithras Gateway license,
which opens you up to more stuff that you can use from their stuff. But there's more. I think there's more strings attached. We're still kind of going through that, but so it's a little. Yeah, it's a little frustrating.
And I the reason this
not the Mithras license in particular, but license.
I mean, I think the reason this is it's just. It's only comparatively recently that people are even thinking about this really as a thing. Even during like the early 2000s with like the D20 boom, I don't think there was the sort of awareness in the air and the questions that are in the air about how do we do this? Can we do this? What's going to happen? What's definitely not going to happen? What definitely will happen?
And I don't want to get too far afield, but it's like game mechanics as such are not subject to intellectual property rights. And so these licenses in a lot of cases are like, I'm promising, if you agree to my license, I promise not to sue you frivolously.
It's a very antagonistic relationship. Where
it's so annoying. But I get it. But that part of it is very frustrating of just being like, this is all us agreeing not to shoot each other over things we're not allowed to shoot each other for.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, that's, my vote is for which I know this is not a democracy, but but is there anything else about the Broken Empires in particular that you want to say? What are you shooting for in terms of the quality of the book? I mean, obviously, the highest quality is probably the answer.
But that's important to talk about.
Yeah, if someone wants to back the Kickstarter on October 1st for the Broken Empires, which you should, what can they expect? To be backing? Like what do they receive?
So I'm a big stickler for quality hardback books. Yes, we're going to release PDFs, and yes, of course, when you buy the book, you get the PDF. Of course, yes, yes, there's a digital bundle. Yes, but for me, I'm treating this exactly. I'm treating the whole game like what do I want from this experience? Yeah, I write the game rules with that in mind. What do I like? So it's the same thing with this. What's a Kickstarter that I would back, that I would get excited about? What are the things that I value? And I value value. I like the idea that you have a solid book that you can grab and open on the table, and it stays open and it doesn't crack the spine, and it's got bookmarks and it's got cool art. It's got full color art by a variety of artists from all over the world that are provide evocative images that immediately pull you into the world and give you a sense of the atmosphere and the quality of adventure you can have.
Yeah.
So that's very crucial. We're working with a number of artists from Spain and Portugal. There's a cartographer from Canada and from Scotland, and we have another artist I think that just signed on from Brazil. I think we've got American artists as well. One of my patrons, James, our RPG Art, who is very successful in his own Patreon.
Yeah.
He's providing a bunch of stuff. He's a guy that has provided a lot of motion images for my show over the years. I'd say to him,
Nice.
"Hey, dude, I need a picture of the chamber of the soul cage, and it kind of looks like this." And he'd say, "Like that?" And I'd say, "Yep." And I'd put it in the show. So those are all. He's generously agreed to allow those to be in the book. So all kinds of really cool stuff. We've got. I don't want to say anything about that yet. There's a lot of things down the pipe with stretch goals and add-ons and stuff that are, will be revealed over the course of the Kickstarter.
Right.
Very cool. But sort of the main bundle, I guess, is you would get the hardcover book, and there's a premium edition, and it's not just a fancy cover. It's all kind of like I forget the terminology, but it's basically like the art is a bit not embossed. I don't speak that. This is my designer telling me, and it's this and this and this, and I don't remember the terms. But it's cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's cool.
It's got like foil stamping or something.
Foil stamping, exactly. And multicolored pages, and I don't know, unicorns fly out of its butt. Whatever. There's all kinds of cool stuff with that one. But also you get the starter set, and the starter set is a box set, good high quality box stuff with a truncated version of the rules in a booklet with pre-gen characters, and the pre-gen characters aren't just any characters, let me tell you that. And
Familiar
dice,
faces,
all kinds of. Oh yeah, that's the other thing we're planning to have. Like you don't need custom dice for the game, but we're gonna make custom dice for the game.
Yeah,
because it's cool to have it.
Yep.
So yeah, you get all this stuff. You get like a pad of character sheets, double-sided character sheets, and you get tokens that you can use again. A lot of this is optional for the game, but it just makes it easier to run. You know. Double-sided maps with zones on it and not and all kinds of stuff. So you really get a lot for this starter bundle. I forget what the term we have for it, but it's like a lot of Kickstarters where you come in at the digital, and then you could just get the book, and then you could just get the premium book, but then you can get the bundle with the starter set, and then you can get the one with the GM screen, and then the usual stuff. But all of it's good. None of it's just thrown in because we need to justify another $100.
Yeah. How do we get them to bankrupt themselves? You know,
We need more whales.
Yeah.
You talk because I just did the thing. Go ahead.
Well, this sounds great. I as you can see, no, you guys can't see, but there is a large shelf of Nick's very high quality books. We are hardcover sewn
enjoyers.
binding enjoyers.
Yes.
I want a book that lasts for a very, very long time. Print on demand has its place, but you just can't beat a sewn binding.
Exactly.
I want and that sounds awesome.
That's what
I'll be
we're striving for.
Yep.
The best, only the best. And if you order now, you get a special. Yes.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you had interesting that we missed about the game?
Some selection. No, I'm
Nice.
no, I think that's everything. We covered like a lot. In fact, I've given you guys more details in this interview than I've given anybody ever. So
nice.
There's that. If you want to become a VIP backer, I don't know when this is going to go out, but there's still time to become an early backer. And if you become a VIP backer, you get like a bonus adventure called the Gloaming Pool, as well as a bonus set of dice. And if you sign up on the first day, I think we've got a special thing
Early
planned.
bird special or
Specials, all that stuff to get people excited about it.
I am super excited for it. I can't wait for it.
Cool.
I'm super pumped. This definitely has the interest of the Black Lodge. So we are looking forward to this. And I hope you guys go and sign up for it and back this on day one. These Kickstarters live and die
on the first
day. And I think you're going to have a very good first day.
Here's hoping.
And we would love to have you back and talk about it again once it's all said and done. Especially with this the crowdfunding platform you're using.
This pre-platform with the Very interested to pick your brain about
when it's
that.
all said and done.
But you have an open invite to always come back, talk about anything you want. This has been Awesome.
Yes,
Thank you so
thanks for
much
having
for coming on the show.
Thank you, man.
Alright.
All right.